Let's look at this story then. This, of course, is the world of property and all that goes with it, particularly if you're renting, if you're in that ballpark of, a landlord, if you're in an area where you're considering legging it from mum and dad, etc., or you're deciding that you want to, sit on your money for a little bit and see how it pans out. It never goes away. It's a kind of all-encompassing, never-ending issue around the world of rental, property purchasing. If you're a landlord, if that is your area, your industry, it's a live wire story that now makes front pages where once upon a time it just made property pages in smaller magazines. It's huge. The controversy of where you live. The cost of renting in Britain has reached record highs. The average monthly rent is now more than 400 quid higher than it was 5 years ago. So looking outside of London, the capital, rents have hit a new peak of an average of £1,365 per month, while in London the average is £2,712. So you've got to be earning well over 30 grand a year just to pay your rent if you want to live in the capital. However, the pace of rent increases is apparently slowing, suggesting conditions may soon improve for tenants. But by how much? Let's speak with Paul Shamplina, founder of Landlord Action, who regularly helps us out on these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Paul. And I guess, look, these numbers, you've been on this show many, many times. We've crunched the numbers. We've talked about them. The issue surrounding a lack of availability as well as the high rents, etc. I mean, it's an absolute mess out there at the moment, and it's apparently going to get a little bit better, but only a bit.
Well, I think you summarised it really well. I've seen the Ripoff. It says tenants ripped off as average rents soar. I mean, look, the rents have gone right up. Look, affordability is a big issue with regard to tenants, without a doubt, the cost of living crisis, but rents have levelled off. So that's good news for renters. But if you say about those numbers, I mean, excluding London, the average rent is £1,365. It used to be under £1,000 2-3 years ago. Yeah. I mean, it's gone up, like you said, over £400 a month, which is a big sharp rise of 4%. The good news for tenants is that about a quarter of rental properties, 25% of rental properties, now tenants are giving bids and there are rental reductions. So landlords are taking lesser bids. But of course, there's a big whole massive change in our industry, and we talk about this a lot when I see you at the shows as well, Ian. It's obviously the Renters' Rights Bill that's coming in, which is going to have massive changes on the industry with regard to periodic tenancies, not longer tenancies, the abolishment of Section 21. There's been lots of uncertainty, and by that uncertainty, let me just give you these numbers. There was 451,000 sales instructions, of which 70,000 of those were formal rentals. So what does that mean? It means landlords have been selling up. We talked about this loads of times, more so the smaller landlords. And what does that mean? It means that some landlords may not have put the rent up for some years, because they wanted a good tenant and they cared about the tenant, wanted to stay in the property. And then all of a sudden they think, I'm getting out because of all loads of different reasons, mortgage costs, tax costs, all that stuff. And then, of course, the good tenant, because let's face it, 95% of tenants out there are really good tenants, look after property, pay on time, then they're going to be told to leave. So what I do think will happen is when the legislation comes out and it's now going to be going to ping pong and there's conference season. So Labour need to announce in their manifesto at conference that we've brought this Renters' Rights Bill in because, of course, it was right at the top of their manifesto, especially for renters, of course, of renters' votes, is that we've now brought in the abolishment and the abolishment of the Section 21, which means you can't just serve a 2-month notice. What will happen is when that announcement is made, I can see more landlords trying to beat the ban, most probably. But it's actually a side-eyed complimentary piece to say actually rents are levelling out, even though the headline says it's gone up to 1365.
So levelling out is one thing, but of course the big question is a bit like when they say house prices are coming down. It's like, well, by how much? Are they coming down by 50%? Because that's what some first-time buyers would like to see. Or are they coming down by 0.1%?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is this. You now got 11 tenants looking for one property where 4 months ago it used to be 16. So the supply and demand has levelled up a bit. Yeah, so there's been more supply coming in. Even though landlords are coming in, there's the big institutional investors buying. And I'm seeing a client tomorrow that got 3,500 units. I'm training them, and they're buying another 2,000 units. So there's a lot of big corporate landlords, pension funds that are buying blocks and coming into the private rental sector, which I think generally the government prefer bigger institutional landlords rather than smaller landlords, Ian.
Yeah, does that, I mean, maybe the bigger institutions can weather the difficulties or the changes to the things like the Renters' Rights Bill, etc. They're able to do that. They've got the money behind them to do it. And, you know, if you're the accidental landlord or you just have 2 or 3 properties, then maybe some of that legislation. We were at the Landlord Investment Show, Paul, big panel of experts. I was chairing it. Somehow you made it onto the panel, which was great to see.
I mean, you did beg me to come on.
Exactly, yeah. Fees were paid, of course. But no, it was great to see you there. And you remember at the end of that particular session, we asked, I said to the audience of landlords, you know, put your hand up if you're completely across the detail of the Renters' Rights Bill. And there were loads of people who simply weren't. They still didn't quite, you know, have their head around what these changes mean. Some of that, you know, is about a lack of information. And when you've got that information, correct, a lack of confidence and uncertainty is what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is being a landlord is a profession. It should be deemed as a job. It should be deemed as, you know, making sure you're offering your customer, the tenant, the best service possible. If you can't do that or you don't have the time, then you need to use an accredited letting agent. I mean, we did a survey recently, and 47% of letting agents still don't have a proper hand on the Renters' Rights Bill because nothing's been announced in law. But they are the biggest changes. And look, the reality is that tenants need greater security, and that's why this bill has come in. Landlords need to look long term, and there's still lots of landlords buying and selling from each other. But of course, the good old days of landlords earning loads of money is not like it was not like it used to be, because of course they had 0% interest rates as well.
Of course. What's interesting about this is that the whole bill that's coming in terms of landlords and what it means for tenants and affordability of rents. I mean, there is an argument that says actually it may well put rents up a bit, because some of the changes to legislation seem to favour, some landlords argue, seem to favour the tenant over the landlord. And as a result of that, certain insecurities that landlords didn't have previously in terms of things like deposits and, you know, evictions and all sorts of other options that are going to be closed off to landlords could mean that landlords go, well, OK, I'll just stick the rent up a little bit so I cover my backside in that way.
That is the reality. Landlords are putting rents up before this bill comes in, because there's new laws coming in with regard to rent rises and first-tier tribunal. There's been a change with regard to initially they changed the bill. I don't understand why they changed the bill. That, you know, I think quite rightly a landlord should rent out to a tenant that wants a pet. I think it's good for mental health and good for stability. And the landlord could request for the tenant to pay for pet insurance for damage, which is quite reasonable.
Yep.
But then the government have changed their mind in the amendments and said, no, the landlord has to pay for the insurance, not the tenant. So if you were my tenant and you're coming in with your Alsatian, as a landlord, bearing in mind I'm getting loads of costs, would I want to pay the insurance?
Yeah, who conjured up that idea? I mean, it depends on the pet as well. I mean, a bit troubling if you've got an otter or something. I mean, that might be tricky.
Or a goldfish.
Or goldfish. Yeah, indeed. So the landlord should have to pay the insurance for someone's
but it makes
dog,
no sense.
Like, you know, chewing up the skirting boards and God knows what else in the bathroom or the kitchen.
I know. Look, I represent, one of the companies I represent is My Deposits. We're one of the major deposit schemes, and you know we protect like £1.3 billion worth of deposits and deal with deposit disputes. And actually, pet damage is actually quite low. But the thing is, landlords need confidence. You know, tenants want. I mean, the average term now, I think, is something like a tenant moving in to a property, is something living in a property is something like just under 3 years. So tenants are staying longer.
Yep.
You know, depending on the type of property. You know, you can't have anti-bidding wars, so you can't have an auction. You can't have discrimination. So lots of the stuff. I mean, our Abbas Law, the poor little boy that died, you know, with regard to mould and condensation. A lot of the stuff should come in and will come in, and it will make renting better.
100%.
But landlords need to up their game and be more educated.
Indeed. You are always on the circuit talking about this stuff. You'll be back at the Landlord Investment investment show, Paul, in the autumn. I think you're doing Bristol, Manchester and London.
I am, yes, and I'm doing loads of other talks all over the country as well for
Wow.
landlords and agents, and just spreading the word of being a professional landlord and helping tenants out.
Well, if you want more details of where you can see Paul, Landlord Investment Show, Google it, look it up, check those dates, get along to some of the debates as well that are there, and find out more information for yourself, because, of course, it is a massive area of ambiguity. It's foggy for landlords, it's foggy for tenants, and the Labour government, too late to moan about it too much because this thing is coming in, but the Labour government have definitely, I think anyway, they've taken that line of, like, you know, landlords bad, tenants good, and that of course can sometimes be the case, but it's rarely the case, frankly. Almost, you know, relatively speaking, as a proportion, it's tiny. And it works the same the other way around, probably more of a problem the other way around. But it's meant that landlords are left in this kind of no man's land of, well, what am I meant to do? Do I put rents up? That doesn't address the wider problem of affordability in housing. It's absolutely huge. And this is coming in. And the upshot, as you can imagine, if landlords are thinking, well, I'm going to be collared for this, that and the other, and it's going to be more risky, I think that's perhaps the area. There's going to be more uncertainty in terms of the stability of this. I've been told, you know, that by some people politically that, you know, I'm part of a rogue industry, but simultaneously I'm being asked to legislate as if I'm some kind of Russian plutocrat who owns 10,000 units somewhere. Can't be both ways. So as a result, what I'll do to protect myself with new legislation coming in, which you think is a bit risky as a landlord, I'm going to up my rent in the meantime, cover my backside a little bit. Thank you to Paul Shamplina. Always good to have Paul on.